And now to the Middle East, where 7 Israelis and at least 56 Palestinians have been killed in the worst violence there in years. As Israel conducts airstrikes and Palestinian militants fire rockets, Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the United States is dispatching a senior diplomat to the region, and he made this appeal to Israel.
Israel has an extra burden in trying to do everything it possibly can to avoid civilian casualties, even as it is rightfully responding in defense of its people. And as I said, the Palestinian people have the right to safety and security.
Now this after the acting Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, vowed to press on.
Hamas and the Islamic Jihad will pay for this, and they will pay a heavy price.
But the United Nations Special Envoy warns of an escalation to, quote, full-scale war. So joining me now on this is Tzipi Hotovely. She is Israel's ambassador to the United Kingdom and joining me right now. And as we speak, Madam Ambassador, we know that Palestinian children have been killed, and we're just learning also of a 6-year-old Israeli boy who has been killed. So my question to you is, what is your side, and I'm talking to you, a member of the Israeli government, doing to de-escalate this now? Because it doesn't sound very de-escalatory in the voice of the acting Prime Minister or indeed the Defense Minister Benny Gantz.
Hello, Christian. I'm speaking to you from London as the Israeli ambassador. I'm representing the policy of the government of Israel, and at the moment Israel is under attack. All our big cities are under big fire. Over 1,000 of rockets were fired into Israeli cities. On my personal family story, I can tell you my mother was in a shelter last night for the first time for many years in the center of Israel, Tel Aviv, cities you're very familiar with. Israeli parliament was evacuated because rocket attack. Those kind of things any sovereign country cannot tolerate. And we're doing everything that we can in order to protect our people. Israelis deserve to live in peace.
Yes, and as the Secretary of State said, everybody deserves to live in peace and to be able to defend themselves. That's not in question. The question is, how is it going to de-escalate? Will the Israeli government accept a U.S. envoy, as the Secretary of State says is coming? Or how do you think, who has the best chance of helping both sides to de-escalate this right now, if Israel wants to? Or do you believe the policy is to keep hammering Hamas until, as in the words of your policy, they re-establish deterrence?
Well, our policy was always to de-escalate. In the last few days, what Israel has been doing in Jerusalem, to do everything in our power in order to reduce the tension and to make sure that law and order will be kept in our capital city. But unfortunately, what we've seen, and it's very important to understand the political background of this horrible violence that is now being attended to Israeli citizens and civilians. We need to understand the background. The background is the fact the Palestinian Authority has decided to cancel the Palestinian election. On the other side, Hamas wanted to take control on the Palestinian leadership. And because they were disappointed from this Palestinian decision, the radicals, Hamas, a terror organization recognized by United States and by United Kingdom, made a political, cynical decision to hurt Israeli citizens, to use Jerusalem as an excuse, and actually to target children, women and men in Israel in order to achieve political aims. We don't want to see Middle East that
Ambassador,
Hamas is the leadership, the legitimate of the Palestinians.
You also have a political crisis in Israel where the acting Prime Minister appears not to be able to get a government together. The opposition is trying to do that and may not be able to actually deal with this in the way that most people would hope to de-escalate. And I want to know whether you admit that actions by the Israeli police, by right-wing settlers and activists in Palestinian neighborhoods in Jerusalem were provocative, and whether you regret that. Let me just play what one of your main allies, the American negotiator Aaron David Miller, told us on this program last night.
There have been any number of actions that they've taken over the past 3 or 4 weeks particularly on closing the plaza at the beginning of Ramadan and allowing a man like Itamar Ben-Gvir access to incite, that's not smart thinking. It's not rational thinking. It's driven by politics.
So he's, referring to the settler activist who I was talking about. I just want to understand whether you accept that there were major miscalculations, including in the words of a former national security advisor in Israel, Gior Eiland, that started this provocation, and whether you agree that there has to be a pullback from both sides, certainly from your side as well.
Well, Jerusalem is not a settlement. It's the capital city of Israel. Jews and Arabs live together in Jerusalem in coexistence. And let's look at history. Since Jerusalem was united in 1967, freedom of religion and freedom of worship were provided to all religions in the city. We always do anything in our power in order to make sure that Muslims can go on Temple Mount, definitely on this holy time of the year in the Ramadan. So all those years back, look at this. There were never any kind of clashes that we experience in that level. What's the reason? The reason this time we're having those clashes is because
around the
Hamas
plaza.
made a political decision to actually, Christian, I'm saying again, you need to understand 80,000 Muslims were worshipping on Temple Mount. The Israeli government was doing everything in its power to prevent provocations, but actually it's Hamas who's been provocating time after time, really making those youngsters, we've seen the videos, they were piling rocks in order to throw those rocks on innocent Israelis who were coming to pray in the Western Wall. So actually it's Hamas that was provocating, creating violence. Look at those horrible things we've seen in Lod last night. The mayor of Lod said it was unfortunately a Kristallnacht. Can you actually believe it? In Israel, our population is burning synagogues, burning holy places in order to create holy war and religious war. We're against that. Actually, we are the ones who are the moderates and doing everything in our power to de-escalate. And it's actually the other side who's totally motivated by a radical Islamist jihadi ideology. And they want to take over democratic values. Every democratic country today should stand next to Israel and to say Israel has the right to protect itself from those radicals, from those Islamist radicals.
Ambassador, tonight is the last night of Ramadan, is the Eid festival for the Palestinians, for the Muslims. Yes. Over the weekend is the Nakba, which is their counter version of your Jerusalem march. How do you think this is going to proceed? You've seen these escalations over the years. How do you think this is going to proceed?
Yes. Well, I can tell you that the solution is very simple at this case. When Hamas will stop firing, Israel will stop firing. We don't have any desire to have a war. Okay. Israelis want to live in peace. Children want to go back to school. People want to go to work without having rockets being targeted to schools and working places. So this is the reality. When Hamas will stop firing, Israel will get back to peace and normality.
All right. Ismail Haniyeh, who is the political leader of Hamas, as you know, said that if Israel wants to escalate, we're ready for it. If it wants to stop, we're also ready. If they want to remove their hand over Jerusalem, we're ready. The both of you say we're ready, and let's hope there's some mediator who can allow you both to back off. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining me.